Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another one of our graduate case studies. So today we are going to be celebrating Audrey, who is a 10-year-old who went from being 80% accurate in phonological awareness to 98% accurate, who went from having reading scores in the 3rd percentile to the 42nd percentile, spelling scores from the 3rd to the 18th, plus having so many items that were written additionally phonetically correct that she was at the 99th percentile. We'll talk about that more in a minute. And then also, just having the real story behind it. Mom said that at the beginning, she struggled to spell the word cut, as in like t. And when she finished, she was reading 5th grade level materials at 120 words a minute. So one of the things that I hope really inspires you, and one of the reasons that we do this continuously, like every other week, is that there are a lot of bad information stories out there about what's possible for kids with dyslexia. So whether you know this or not, children with dyslexia have superpower brains, and they have the potential to be the most successful. 40% of billionaires are actually dyslexic. And so I think that there's just a tremendous misconception about the fact that skills need to stay at a certain level forever. Like if you have dyslexia, you're going to struggle with reading for the rest of your life, and that's just simply not true. So what I think is really inspiring is that all of what we're about to talk about today happened within a 5-month period. And so for Samantha and Audrey, who we'll talk about more in a second, they had already gone through 2 years of pretty intense speech therapy, and they made little to no progress in that time. They were still at the school tested her at the 2nd percentile. We ended up testing her at the 3rd percentile, but still really, really struggling. And, 5 months later, not really struggling. So I hope that this really inspires you. So if we have not met before, hi, I'm Dr. Rebecca Troy, and part of what we do for families is we give you access to reorganize how your child's brain is hearing and responding to language so that their reading and spelling skills are exponentially improved within just a few months. And so with this comes massive increases in confidence and independence in both reading and spelling. You have the ability to do this right from your own home, making it accessible and practical for you and your family, because I know that some of you literally drive hours out of the way each week to try and get support for your child with dyslexia. So just know that everything that we're about to talk about is something that they did in their home in 10 to 15 minutes a day. So before we get too far into things, I think it's really, really important that you understand what dyslexia really is, because again, this is something that is widely misunderstood. So you'll see on the screen that there are fMRI images of 2 brains. This brain here is of a non-dyslexic person, and this brain here is of a person with dyslexia. And so what's really interesting is that if these 2 people had their eyes closed and they were just at rest, we wouldn't notice anything different about how their brains were performing. But the minute we ask these 2 people to perform a language task, and that might be, decode this word, read this paragraph, spell this word, write this essay, those language tasks for a typical reader are going to light up certain areas of the brain. And so we know these to be kind of critical for language development. And one is back here in what we call the occipital lobe, where vision is controlled, and the other language center that really gets lit up is in the parietal temporal lobes, which are over the ear, which kind of controls like how the brain is processing and hearing the language. So it's this intersection between sight and sound that allows a person to see a letter, know what sound it goes with, be able to read that, spell that, all of those things that a typical reader would do. But then when you look over here at the person with dyslexia, you'll see that there isn't activity back here in the occipital lobe, and there's far less activity in these parietal temporal lobes where the auditory components are taking place. And so that's why a person with dyslexia is going to take in letters, but there's really nothing back here for the brain to use to process that. So it might reverse a letter, it might skip a letter, it might put it backwards, it might add letters in that don't belong. And so all of those things are kind of misfires because the brain isn't activated for language in the same way that a typical reader is. So when we look at this same profile within an EEG, we can see that a typical reader, again, has this activity in the occipital lobe. They have a lot of activity here in the parietal temporal. But again, the reader with dyslexia just has far less here and almost none here in the back. But when you work with a child and you use repetition and you use the power of neuroplasticity, you absolutely can change what the neurological profile looks like. So we know that the brain is a dynamic organ that changes over time. Whether, like we are trying to change how anxious we are, or we're trying to change other attributes of our life, we can use the power of plasticity to change those things as well. So I think there's just been this really erroneous misconception for a long time that the brain is fixed and that the way that it is at birth is just kind of the way it is throughout your life. But we know now, especially with the improvement of different imaging equipment, that you absolutely can change your brain, and you should. So when you know that this is possible and you can actually teach your child's brain to hear and respond to language, it's really, really incredible how that shifts your mindset in terms of what's possible. So again, I hope that this inspires you. Samantha is one of our amazing former clients. She was a tremendous advocate for her daughter, and so I just want to tell you their story. So Audrey was going into the 5th grade when we met. So she had several diagnoses at that time. She was diagnosed with sensory processing disorder, auditory processing disorder, and in 3rd grade, they additionally added dyslexia to that profile. So mom did absolutely everything that she could to be supportive, to learn, to research everything that she could about dyslexia and these types of things. And so they invested in some help. They went to a speech pathologist who she worked with pretty continuously for about 2 years. That speech pathologist made a combination for her of Orton Gillingham and Lindenwood Bell programming, and mom said things were not progressing. Her diagnosis was pretty severe. She was given a double deficit dyslexia diagnosis, where she really was unable to sound out words, and her brain was not able to put multiple sounds together. Nothing we did seemed to stick. I really didn't feel like it was clicking. Nothing was retained long term. And so that was after 2 years of kind of doing this intervention. So I think what's important to know is that even though you might be doing an intervention now, just because it isn't working and it's making slow, if any, progress, doesn't mean that that's not possible ever. It might mean that you have the wrong tools, that you're not working on the root cause issues. And so just doing more phonics and having your child practice more phonics isn't going to get back to that root cause, which is the fact that your child's brain likely isn't lighting up for language. And so without that, you're kind of putting a Band-Aid on it, and you're not able to get to the core of what the real problem is. So she was at a 1st grade level even after 2 years of speech. And I think, again, for Samantha, as for so many of our clients, it's when these struggles in literacy pair with the social emotional components, that it becomes obvious, like, oh my goodness, we absolutely have to do something about this. So her confidence was really going downhill, and so was her self-esteem. And so I think as a parent, anytime that you see your child massively struggling with their self-esteem and with their confidence, she just got to the point where she said, we have to do something. There's got to be something else that we can do or try. She was realizing that what they were doing wasn't working, but they had to do something. So it wasn't okay to just like let it go. The steps that they were making were so slow. Mom said that she just got crushed by academic work in fourth grade. Have to find something so that fifth grade isn't a repeat of the same story. So that's when we met. And so she dug in, and she really was an amazing client. So what she had to do was every single day she was asked to do 10 to 15 minutes of work in the modules with her daughter. And so sometimes I'm sure that those got to be like 15, 20 minutes, sometimes less, or you had to skip a day because somebody was having a bad day. But the goal is to have that repetition, because plasticity is dependent upon it. And so, her progress was gradually increasing. And Mom said it wasn't like all of a sudden we made it. It was like, wait a minute, what happened? This is different. So it's kind of like watching grass grow sometimes. Like, you don't always see that there's major change happening until you kind of take a step back and say, like, oh my goodness, we're not doing that anymore. We can do this now. Oh, wow, this isn't happening anymore. It's like this. So, for some clients, it is more spontaneous and they have a more immediate reaction to that. For Samantha and Audrey, it was more of like a slow burn, gradual increase. But again, going from the third percentile to the 42nd, obviously we know that she definitely increased and did an amazing job. But I think, from an emotional perspective, it was powerful because her negative self-talk lowered. She was eager to write books on her own. She's a super artistic, budding artist that is extremely creative. So I want to just pause for a second and tell you, if you don't already know already, that the dyslexic brain has gifts and superpowers. So if you didn't already know that, I hope that you can lean into that as well, because for many, many kids with dyslexia, they only know about the deficits or the things that are making learning hard, but they actually have a heightened sense of creativity. They have heightened spatial thinking. They're often much better at interpersonal relationships. They can be lateral thinkers and, kind of see the big picture when other people cannot. And so it was fun to see not only that piece stay strong, but then to see her literacy skills kind of come up to meet that, I think really makes this beautiful intersection. So her teachers were saying that she was more engaged and participating. She was raising her hand. Her confidence majorly increased. Mom said there isn't an I can't do that mentality anymore. So I'm sure that so many of you know that it is really frustrating when every time you ask your child to do something, you're met with like, oh, I can't, this negative self-talk, all of those pieces. And so to erase that and not have an I can't do that mentality is huge. And then she said she was able to be a better self-advocate, in moments that she needed help. She actually felt confident enough to say, I think I might need some help with this. An amazing moment is Samantha said, her daughter actually said, Mom, I feel smarter. So even though she had done OT and speech and other programs prior, Mom said this was the thing that made the difference. So she went from reading at a first grade level and struggling to spell the word cut to reading at a fifth grade level, 120 words a minute in 5 months. And she was able to phonetically spell the word cacophony, so to go from cut to cacophony in 5 months, again, just massively, massively different. And that came from actually teaching her brain to fire and light up in those areas so that she was able to hear and respond to language like a typical reader. We never saw any backsliding or regression. To finally be able to make progress is huge. And you know that from like a human spirit perspective, right? So nobody does well standing in still water. So water needs to move, and you always need to feel like you're moving and growing. And when you get stagnated and nothing's happening, it just feels icky for you and for your kiddo. So to be able to finally start moving down the river and feeling like things are progressing was absolutely huge. She said, I don't know anything that would produce these kind of results, honestly. So let's take a look at her data, and I want to walk you through statistically why it's so significant that she made these gains. So again, phonological awareness, she had 80% accuracy when she started, so still really misfiring a little when hearing those sounds, to 98% accuracy when she finished. Again, reading from the 3rd to the 42nd percentile. So that's like now average. And then spelling, massive gains here. So from the 3rd percentile to, she had phonetically spelled 99% of the words on that list. And so she still had a couple of words that, maybe she missed the pattern. Maybe it was EE and it should have been EA, which had her at the 18th percentile, which we'll look at in just a minute, is still a huge statistical increase, but just massive, massive gains in all areas. So why this phonological assessment is really so important is this kind of like the underlying theme for dyslexia. If you look at the definition of dyslexia, it is an unexpected difficulty in phonological awareness, reading and spelling. So when the brain has these misfires, and like I'm having a struggle hearing these words, breaking it apart, pulling a sound out, putting those other sounds together, it's that mental Olympics that's really, really a struggle. So in 5 months' time, she kind of wiped that out. She only had one error and went to 98% accurate. So that looked amazing. And then, when you look at educational statistics, I'll just kind of give you a quick overview so you kind of know what we're looking at. This is the normal distribution curve. And so whenever we're looking at data for anything, but specifically in education, we're looking at how much growth did we see from the beginning to the end. So you'll see that right down here, it represents all of the percentiles, kind of what that looks like on this curve. But let's just say that the child is starting at the 50th percentile here where this red mark is. What's typical for any kid to grow in a school year is to go from this red to the blue, a 0.3 of a standard deviation. So to go from this line to this line is considered a standard deviation of growth, a 1.0 in the plus direction. So to go from the 50th up 0.3 is what most kids do in an entire school year. And this would be moderate statistical growth at a 0.5, and this is statistically significant growth at a 0.8. So as we take a look at Audrey's results for reading, we can see that where she started here was at the 3rd percentile. So she's this red one. And the yellow one represents like what would have happened for a typical kid after an entire school year worth of growth. And then if the intervention would have been statistically significant, like we know that it had a positive impact, it was almost a full standard deviation of growth, it was really great, it would have been this kind of brownish orange dot here. But Audrey, within 5 months, so not even an entire school year, went from the 3rd percentile to the 42nd percentile. So what I think is really powerful is if you're looking at this is, the mean or average, she's right there in the average. This is what other kids at my grade level are doing. And she was just 5 months before 1, 2, and a little bit more standard deviation below what was considered average. So, and we'll talk about this later, but making massive leaps in your child's data is really, really important when they're struggling, because if you just keep making these little incremental progress marks, markers and like you're just growing a little bit, you don't close the gap. And so there's still this massive difference between where other kids in your class are performing and what the assignments are that you're being asked to do, et cetera, and where you are. So yes, you might be growing to go from the red to the yellow, but it's really not closing that gap. And so with any intervention that you're doing for a child that's struggling, you really want to make sure that it is going beyond what typical kids grow. We want to be massively growing. And so we're really celebrating the change in a life-changing way for Audrey. And the same thing happened with spelling. So again, before she was at the 3rd percentile, this would be, again, typical growth in an entire year. Here's what statistically significant growth looks like. We know without a doubt that this intervention had a positive impact on this child. She went all the way to here. At the 18th percentile, again, you know, like in that what we would consider average range. And in addition, like she spelled the words, all of them by sound, up to the 99th percentile. So still a little bit of work with spelling patterns would go a long way for her, but absolutely significant gains in reading and spelling. So I think it wouldn't be right to celebrate Audrey's growth without also celebrating Samantha. So what I think is really great about the way that we support families is that we are giving these tools to the person that cares the most about Audrey's success, which is her mother. So that doesn't mean that teachers don't care. That doesn't mean that tutors don't care. It just isn't the same. Like I'm a mother myself, and if my child is struggling with something, there is nobody that cares about my child's success more than me, about their happiness, because I see the whole picture and their lifetime outcomes and how important that is. So giving me the tools as a parent means that I am going to make sure that it gets done to fidelity. I have the ability to fit it in, you know, whether it's in the morning or right before bed or maybe after dinner. Whereas, you know, if I went to tutoring and tutoring is at 5 o'clock, and if I'm in a bad mood, like, too bad, so sad, you got to go at 5 o'clock because I've already paid for this. Do you know what I mean? So having the flexibility to do that around your family, to do that at home, to not have to drive several hours is a big thing. And so it would be silly to think that, you know, just giving somebody the program is what makes it happen. It's the partnership that we have with the family. So giving Samantha the tools to be successful and her showing up day after day to do that for 5 months is what got Audrey these results. So she was committed to the process. She trusted it. She showed up fully to the accountability and the support calls. She was her daughter's greatest advocate. And she had this mindset of like, well, do I just want to cross my fingers and hope that she's going to be in a better place before she graduates high school? Or know that we're going to invest in her regardless. So if we're going to invest in something, let's help invest in something to get her results now. And so, you know, again, her biggest celebration is, oh my goodness, to go from a 1st grade level, you know, spelling the word cut incorrectly to a 5th grade level, reading 120 words a minute. I don't know anything else that could produce those kind of results, honestly. So just a huge, huge celebration to her for her mindset, for her energy, for showing up that way for her daughter and doing the work 10 to 15 minutes a day to get these absolutely incredible results. So Samantha did an amazing job, and this is typically what happens. So if you look at this, remember I mentioned that a 0.3 of a standard deviation of growth is what would happen for most kids typically in a school year. And a 0.8 is like, wow, this intervention was really amazing and it did a lot. Statistically, it was statistically significant in how it supported this child. Our average growth for clients in the program is a 1.7. So nearly 2 standard deviations of growth from the beginning to the end. And again, that's given to parents. It's parents who are getting this result with our coaching. And so we're taking them step by step through. This is everything that you have to do. We're coaching you, making sure that you're getting the progress. We've got mindset coaches, accountability, all of the things to make sure that you're successful. But we are massively proud of this because it's not typical. And again, it comes from the fact that we're going to the root cause, which is the child's brain is not responding to language in the way that a typical reader would. So once you teach it to do that, you can see massive, massive changes in a short period of time. So if you're curious to kind of dig into other statistics, John Hattie is a researcher who has done meta-analyses. So that means he's done studies of studies to look at like, what is it in education that is the most effective? And so some of the things that, he's found that are really, really effective at the top of the list are like a 0.7, a 0.8, a 0.9, a 1.3, a 1.5. Again, we're looking at a 1.7. So we've got our effect sizes up above the top of the list of the 252 influences of factors related to student achievement. I mean, it's just amazing what's possible once you teach the brain to actually use the parts that are needed for language. So why is it critical to close the gap? Again, like I mentioned before, you don't want to just make minimal, if any, progress. You want to make massive progress in a short period of time. And why? Because you miss opportunities, whether it's the fact that you're getting pulled out of class and you can't participate with your peers, or maybe you didn't get to try out for this group, or there's just missed opportunities. Maybe you couldn't take a class that you really wanted to take because you were struggling with literacy. There's current and ongoing struggles, both from an academic and a mental health perspective. It can take away from future opportunities, and it really does impact the whole family. So I'm sure if you interview many, many people that have dyslexia, you will learn that it is not just the child with dyslexia that suffers. It is absolutely a suffering for the parents, and it can affect the whole home as well. So as you know, if a child comes home and they're crying every single day to have to do homework, that's miserable for everybody. So, making sure that we can get results quickly and get out of this is critical. So again, it can help to improve the academic performance. It can increase self-esteem and confidence. It can offer better mental health and have a greater access to other opportunities moving forward. So it's just, I want to articulate, like, you really want to dig in and do something about it. If there is something that you can do about it, and there absolutely is, you want to dig in as quickly as possible and just get this behind you so that your child can have better outcomes in all of those areas. So kind of in terms of next steps, I know that some of you out here might be really still wondering if dyslexia is what you're dealing with. So I know that that can often be a really tricky road, like, oh, I'm noticing some signs. I don't really know, is it, isn't it? And those assessments can be really, really expensive. And so you can be on a waiting list at a center, and it can cost, several $1,000s. And so we have the ability to screen your child with you in less than 20 minutes so that you can have a deep understanding with data that's going to tell you for sure, yes, they're struggling, or no, they're not, and to what level. So you have the ability to sign up for a dyslexia discovery workshop. We're actually doing another one live in just a couple of weeks. So on August 13th at 12:30 p.m. Central, you can be a part of a live workshop that I will be leading to help you to do these assessments and learn how to discover if your child has dyslexia. If you can't do that and you're just like, oh my goodness, I have limited time, there is a link for you to click on that you can do that on your own at home too. So definitely sign up for this if you are unsure. And also, if you are a family who's like, like, oh my goodness, what we're doing right now is not working. And we feel like we're on the hamster wheel, just like Samantha did. And we've been doing multiple years of a therapy and it's just not getting us results. I think it's time for you to look at whether or not your intervention is getting at the root causes. And so when we know that it's the disconnect in how the brain is actually hearing and responding to language, solving that by giving the child access and changing the way that their brain is hearing and responding to language makes sense. And so if you're curious if that's a fit for you, we have an amazing team that offers complimentary calls to see, is that the right fit? So I would invite you to click that link to book now. You can speak with our team. They will ask you a whole bunch of questions about your child and really get to know where you are and where you're at and whether or not this is the right fit for you. So with that, I just want to again say thank you to all of you who are here. Thank you massively to Samantha for being an amazing client and absolutely changing Audrey's life. We were honored to be a part of your journey. So with that, would anybody here like to ask any questions? Anybody have anything that they're wondering? You can just unmute and ask. Okay, amazing. Well, I will look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks. So if again you're unfamiliar with our program, we do this every other week. So we'll be back in 2 weeks to share another client celebration. Thanks, everybody. I hope you have an awesome day.